I am a vegetarian. I decided to choose this topic because for the last 2 years, I've been saying that one of my reasons for being vegetarian was to reduce my environmental impact, and I wanted to find out whether that was true and how much I've actually reduced my footprint. No, I am not trying to insult anyone or convert you to a plant-based diet. If you have any questions, please come see me after class. Cows have been domesticated for approximately 10,000 years, beginning in Africa and Egypt. Around 200 years ago, 90% of North Americans lived on farms and produced their own food. During the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s and 1900s, tractors and other machines began to replace hand tools and horses. This meant that larger amounts of food could be produced in a smaller time period, and larger amounts of food, plus more free time, means that there was less stress and therefore more people. More people created a greater demand for food. A greater demand for food created a greater demand for improved technology, and so technology improved. In 1861, refrigeration containers on trains enabled meat to be available in larger centers, and therefore, beef took over as the most popular meat. Formerly, pork was more popular because it could be salted in barrels and stored for months. We reached 1 billion people in 1800 and added 6 billion people in the 200 years since then. In the 1940s, one farmer could feed 19 people off his land per year. Today, one farmer can feed 155 people from his or her land per year. Only 2% of people provide the food for all of the people in the world. Our population has increased, but our land mass has not. With 7 billion people on the planet, we have a lot of mouths to feed on the same amount of land that we've always had. This has led to more intensive agricultural practices. Factory farms have exploded from none in the first half of the 20th century to 3,600 in the US in the 80s to over 20,000 in the US today. The average cow weighs about 1,200 pounds, including their innards and their bones. That same cow eats 24 to 30 pounds of food per day, depending on the type of food and whether that cow is lactating or not. 24 pounds times 365 days of the year means that one cow eats 8,760 pounds of food per year. One cow drinks between 20 and 28 liters of water per day in mild temperatures. 20 times 365 equals 7,300 liters of water per year per cow. And, of course, not all of that cow is edible. That includes the intestines, the innards, and all of the parts that you don't want to eat. When all of those inedible parts are stripped away, you're left with about 550 pounds of cow of the original 1,200 pounds. This means you need 15.9 pounds of food and 13.3 liters of water to produce 1 pound of meat. In 2013, 33.2 million cows were raised in the US alone. That's 290.8 billion pounds of food and 242.4 billion liters of water, which doesn't include the amount of water used to grow food per year. Not only do food animals take up fresh water and crops that could be reallocated to people who are malnourished, they create a huge amount of greenhouse gases. Respirations aren't considered a significant source of carbon emissions because the CO2 from the plant is being stored in the cow when it eats it. That plant material, however, stores the carbon outside of the atmosphere, while the animal exhaling that CO2 is releasing it into the atmosphere. Livestock respirations are estimated to account for 8.769 billion imperial tons of CO2, but aren't included when calculating GHG emissions. 148,326,000 square kilometers of Earth's surface area is land. 38% of that is used for agriculture, but only 11% is used to grow crops for people. That means 27% of the world's agricultural land is used to grow food for the animals that we eat instead of for the people that we live with. Most natural grasslands are already being used for agriculture, so we have to destroy more forests to make room for animal pasturing. Developing nations, such as those in South America, recognize that animals are a cash crop in their own right as the world's love of meat increases, so they are chopping down forests in order to clear land for animals. This is the #1 cause of rainforest loss in South America. Cows in particular gradually destroy the land they're raised on, so more land needs to be clear-cut to make room for them once they've destroyed the land they're currently on. One of the biggest problems with deforestation for the sake of raising animals is the loss of carbon sinks, more so the amount of GHGs the animals produce. Chopping down trees takes away that ability for the tree to take in carbon. Cows and the bacteria inside of them expel a huge amount of methane, between 100 and 500 liters a day each. Most of this is from burping. Because of its chemical composition, methane is 23 times the contributor to global warming that CO2 is. That said, methane also decomposes quicker than CO2 does, so if we reduce our consumption of animal products, we will also reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that are being released into the atmosphere. Livestock is also responsible for 67% of human-caused nitrous oxide emissions due to the fertilizer used to grow their food, as well as the chemicals used to treat their waste. Other causes of greenhouse gas emissions related to livestock include transportation, fluorocarbons needed to cool and store meat, longer cooking periods, waste product disposal of the bones, innards, liquid and solid waste, and spoilage, so meat that's gone bad, and product packaging, which because of food safe regulations is more plastic intensive than other foods. Remember how I said I wasn't including the amount of water that's involved in the process of producing feed? In 2004, the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations wrote that in North America alone, at least 335 trillion liters of water is lost to growing food for animals, mostly for cow fodder. This is in addition to the 242 billion liters of water that cows in the US alone drink per year. According to the US Environmental Protection Agency, the amount of waste created by livestock is reported to be 3 times as much as humans. A dairy farm with 2,500 cows can generate as much excretory material as a city the size of Miami, Florida. This waste is not treated. This waste is used for manure, but more waste is created than can be used for manure, so the extra runs off the crops into the river and aquifer systems, contaminating them with the pesticides mixed in with the fertilizer, as well as foreign bacteria and hormones. This runoff then causes an overgrowth of algae, which produces a large amount of oxygen, allowing other creatures to thrive. When the algae dies, it uses up more oxygen than it manufactured when it rots, and therefore it kills the other creatures, which in turn use up more oxygen as they rot. This lack of oxygen causes a dead zone, where nothing can live because there's not enough oxygen. One of the largest dead zones in the world is in the Gulf of Mexico, where the water from the Mississippi spills out, bringing all of the runoff from most of the agricultural intensive states with it. It's estimated that there are more than 550 dead zones worldwide. Contrary to popular belief, we do not need to eat meat to get all of our protein. Plenty of world-class athletes such as Dave Zabriskie have gone vegan or vegetarian in order to avoid food poisoning, as well as the trans fats that are inevitable with the consumption of meat. Only 6% of vegetarians and 2% of vegans are overweight, compared to 30.5% of the general US population. This, of course, is also a problem in Canada. At the same time, we have a hunger epidemic on our planet, and yet we grow enough food to feed 10 billion people. People consume only 55% of the crop calories grown. The rest go to livestock and biofuels. For every 100 calories of grain we feed animals, we get only about 40 new calories of milk, 22 calories of eggs, 12 of chicken, 10 of pork, or 3 calories of beef. On 1.5 acres of land, you can raise 1 cow. In contrast, you can raise 6,000 pounds of beans, 15,750 pounds of broccoli, 60,000 pounds of pumpkin, 45,000 pounds of carrots, or 40,500 pounds of lettuce on 1.5 acres. Even though there are only 34 calories in a pound of broccoli compared to 250 calories in a pound of beef, you can still raise 535,500 calories per 1.5 acres of broccoli, compared to 137,500 calories per 1.5 acres of beef. Basically, the best solution is to stop eating meat and animal products entirely. The next best is to cut out the majority from your diet. I still eat eggs, I still eat dairy, but I don't eat them all the time. As a luxury item, rather than an everyday, multiple times a day sort of thing, it will be much easier for us to decrease our environmental impact. If you're not an environmentalist or you don't think you can do this, that's fine. As I said, I'm not here to convert anyone, but please think about this when you're talking to vegetarians or anyone else about why you eat meat.